tour and revisit it some other time. So there are certain things that don't, like there's some things where there's a translation equivalent for, but we always got to watch for trying to make sure that we're not trying to fit everything into the way we speak English. And there's some examples of this. In Yakutat, they say yecha yati. That's how they prefer to respond to Ganesh Chish. A lot of other people, they just say or you could just kind of say, there's some contextual stuff, like you say yake or hechwasa. There's things you don't really need to say anything, but if you feel the need, is always just, that's fine. You're just saying yes. Like if somebody sneezes, you could say gunachsa. Or we say gunachsa.
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 But the response when somebody says that is you might want to say gunachish, but that's not the correct answer to the question, because the question is, where did it come out of? Right? Through, it literally means through what? Gunachsa would be through what?
When someone sees it, through where? Like,
through where? Yeah, like so. Tzadach, shinach, cheinach. Right, so there's something that's supposed to be lucky about sneezing out the left side. I heard. But I don't know. I always sneeze out my mouth, so I don't have any of that good luck. But there's just little kind of fun things like that. And so we can look at some things as we go along. But I thought a fun kind of starting point would be, I know I got a couple of you sent me some things. I was working on some translations of some of the violin things. But what's been on your mind as far as learning the language and thinking about how to start using it as a teacher, things that you might want to be working on, starting to think about developing some sort of lesson that you're going to show us. When are we doing that? If you guys want to do that, we're going to do it twice. What did I say? Remember? Let me look at my handy dandy sheet that I sent around. So according to our... Wait, let me rearrange here so I can share a screen. This chair is very short. There we go. That there. That here. Share the screen. Okay, so kind of, that looks really blurry to me. So kind of thinking about what we're going to try to do here. And we should also just talk a little, hold on. We should talk a little bit about what we're trying to do here, how it's going. Basically, the next time we get together, there's this plan where we'll present you guys' lessons, but we can, well, we could move it if we want, or, because I know we've only met a few times, and so with this sort of every other week thing, what are you guys thinking about putting together? And so I'm not trying to see you teaching the language to somebody, but what I'm looking for is how are you incorporating this into the types of things that you do as a teacher? How is knowledge of the language going to affect you as a teacher? But if you want to be ambitious and you want to say, well, I actually want to teach some of these things, and that's totally fine as well. So it could be an activity that you're leading that teaches some of the content we're looking at. It could be taking some of this content and incorporating it into your stuff, or it could be finding other content and incorporating that into the types of things that you're currently teaching that you would like to. So what kinds of ideas have you been kind of rolling around?
We've been trying to figure out how to use that video game Minecraft with students. And so one idea is just straight vocabulary. So the kids build different items, create different items, and label them for non-player characters. And when you touch the non-player character, it speaks or talks in Tlingit. And then another idea was to have them engage with like the stories from Hashuka and create that world, and then record like a play, the story in Minecraft. Just trying to combine their excitement about video gaming.
Oh, fun.
Poet, cultural content.
Yeah, that's great. When I first started this job, somebody contacted me from this organization called Virtual Native Lands. And so after ANCSA, there was an amendment, and they started the 13th Regional Corporation. And the 13th Regional Corporation didn't really have any money, and they didn't really have any land. Well, they had a little bit of money, but they had no land, and they ended up kind of running out of money. But they had started this sort of company called Virtual Native Lands, where they thought the internet would sort of become their land, right? It was a really interesting idea. But then they had another interesting idea where they wanted to create a video game that was a Tlingit language-based video game, where basically you would have characters, and then you would speak, and you would go up a level just as your fluency would kind of go up a level. So we had like this one interesting phone conversation, and then I have no idea whatever happened with them. But I said, well, I don't know how many. It's a neat idea. You'd have to get enough speakers into that environment, and including some who could boost the levels of everybody. So, but yeah, I think there's a lot of neat things you could do to look at how games and gaming could be utilizing the language. And we were just talking about this today, developing some board games and some ideas that we saw. There was the only board game in Tlingit I've seen was made in Atlin, where they have these place names, and nobody ever showed me how to play it. But you got to get to the place, and then you have to know the name of the place, and you have to know the name of the type of thing that you harvest at that place, and then you can go to then you can sort of go along. So that was knowledge of their land, because it would actually be the places where they'd go mountain goat hunting or go for soap berries or whatever. And so it was a pretty neat idea. So I think there's a lot of things that you could do that are using the language, whether you're sort of the language is just some part of it, or whether it's the sort of central sort of theme. Sounds great. Sheesh.
I've been doing drawing lessons with kids this past month and working with the really young kids. And so you helped find a phrase. We kind of spent quite a bit of time on it. You were sort of exploring the verb dictionary using the idea of looking closely and examining something.
Yeah.
So I've just been incorporating the phrase adaya misa into, I hope I'm still pronouncing it all right, into the lesson. And so I teach that as I teach that phrase along with the kind of, I don't mean to say command, but like I'm inviting them to look really closely, really examine it. It's a different kind of looking than, just kind of glancing at something. So they're learning to draw from observation, and it's been working really well. I have a little sticker that says adaya misa on the sticker, and then underneath it says examine it, look closely. And then they put that on the top of their sketchbooks. And so their little voices are just using the phrase quite a bit. They practice it back with me. I say I'm a language learner too. I'm a Tlingit language learner, so I'll practice it while I hand you your sticker and you practice it. And that's at the end of the lesson, and then put it on their sketchbooks. But throughout the whole lesson, I'm encouraging them. If I see them drawing, when I go around and they're drawing, I say, adaya misa, really look at it, examine it. So I hope that's appropriate. It seems to be working really well just to have one simple phrase. With one of the lessons, they're drawing little tree seedlings that I've yanked up from alongside the highway.
Oh, okay.
Because they're going to be mowed anyway.
Right.
But I have the roots attached to them, and so I kind of need the kids to believe I'm going to plant them again, which I'm not.
Plant parts can be really fun.
But so then they're all either an alder, a hemlock, or a spruce, and so I've got from our nouns, and then I think the one that wasn't there, alder is one of the nouns in our book.
Keshish.
Keshish and yan.
Keshish, yeah.
Keshish, keshish and yan.
Yan.
Yan is it the same way? Yan for hemlock, and then starts with an H.
Shaky.
But I wrote the Tlingit name and which little seed they think they had. They tell a partner, I think my tree will grow up to be and they can try the Tlingit, or they can just say
okay.
what it is. But so I hope it's kind of fits with the harmony, the core cultural value of just being more in touch with the land and we're using the phrase. I probably should apologize every time that I'm learning and maybe not pronouncing things right.
It's fine. I think
Just
you
going
just
for it.
you just go. I mean,
I'm in it.
as long as you're not being like reckless, you know. I mean, we're always mindful of that. But if you're learning, you're learning, and if you're using it, you're using it. And so we'll find the things that we need to fine tune. And the vowels, it's very common that the vowels need, you know, because we're making them long instead of short. Or, yeah. And so yun is a really fun one because it has multiple meanings, and they might be related, but they might be two separate words. So you have yun, which is the hemlock tree. Then you have yun, which would be if we're in a boat and there's the shore. The shore is yun. And then there's yun, which is sort of a low tone, which comes before a verb, which would mean to completion. Like yejehwane would be I worked. Yun yejehwane would be I finished working on that, like it's done. So it means to bring a verb to completion. And so Tlingit does all kinds of stuff in verbs to mark things. Like, so, did it happen or didn't happen? Oh, and did it finish whatever it was doing? And so there's a lot of ways to mark those types of things.
But the high tone would indicate it's the hemlock.
Yes. But the same word would be the shore.
High tone too?
They're both high
But
tone.
it's really going to be about context. Right?
Yeah.
You're not gonna
Context
say
in which you're using the word.
Because if you were on the shore and then there was a hemlock over there and you were in a boat and someone said, Yande nakuch, you would probably go to the shore. You probably wouldn't drive your boat into the hemlock. But, you know, and so it's a context thing. So that's,
Or where the hemlock is.
Yeah.
right. And so it's just like if they said, you know, tie a bow on it in English, you're not going to put my cousin Bo on it. You know, you're gonna, so yeah, we'll run into homonyms, but yun is a really fun one. Keshish, trees, those are really fun ones. Kwani is the way we refer to the trees when we talk about them in a really respectful way, because it translates to tree people. So we can develop whole lessons on that. Just, what kind of tree do you think this is? And we can look at some sentences like that too. So it's really fun. Excellent. How about you? What have you been thinking about?
Well, I don't teach a classroom. I work with teachers and other community members, so I'm trying to think of ways to bring the language into meetings that are talking about arts education. So, but we did use Nancy's term for looking closely at some data about arts education at our last meeting. So
Oh, nice.
I kind of pulled her use of the word into the meeting. So I want to think more fully about how to use the language in that way.
Yeah, like reading, thinking, talking, planning.
Mm-hmm.
So there's a bunch of stuff, and so reading and counting are the same verb, which is kind of interesting in Tlingit.
Oh.
So you'd say natu or naitu. Natu would be the one verb, but naitu, gede naitu yata, read this thing carefully. So naitu would be it. So maybe just something with the verb for reading and counting. Those ones are really fun. Because that verb also means teaching and learning, right? It's the same verb root. From this one verb root comes counting, reading, learning, teaching.
Well, we didn't have reading in the past, right? So that's probably how it was brought, you know.
Yeah.
How are we going to use this verb, or, you know, what verb are we going to use to talk about reading? And that's a new concept.
Yeah, right, makes sense. So then, and a teacher, tu, so the tu is the part, and that's the name for a teacher. Tlingit tu, I'm studying Tlingit, so you hear that tu in the end as well. Naitu, read it. Detu Hukdakahiti is the name we gave to library, which is reading, book, house around, right? So yeah, there's some fun stuff. Meeting, to gather, time. There's some different things that do that be really fun. Okay, wrap up.
Well, since we're just starting, but one thing that I've been trying to figure out is if I'm supposed to be in an immersion classroom. When I taught at Gastineau and other schools, it was always just teaching, unless I was in Shan's room, of course, it was always just teaching language, and it didn't always have to do with content in which the teachers, it was always like, well, it's November, so let's talk about food and gratefulness, and it's October, let's talk about spiders, but like in Shan's room, we always coordinated to try to work through the content with the language, but it was still just teaching language individually. But like thinking about being in an immersion room, like let's say we're 6 months in, the kids should already know the words. So figuring out how to actually teach the content through the language to the 3, 4, 5-year-olds.
Yeah.
You know, so like they know kayani, they know this is plants or leaves, but how are we going to teach the content about those leaves? You know.
Right. Well,
to that. That's where I'm at, and I haven't had the kids, so I don't even know what is that going to look like. You know, even or if I'm doing stations, like if we start toddler time, and I want to do stations or crafts, and trying to teach the content through the language rather than this is a leaf, this is a branch. You know, but trying to actually teach about the tree at that age level.
Well, so I went into a kindergarten class, and when you go to Nawahi, which is the Hawaiian medium school, when they take you there, they give you this, you go here for 5 minutes, and you go here for 5 minutes, you go here for 5 minutes, because they don't want, everything's going to be a huge disruption for them, because they've created this Hawaiian-only environment. And, but when they taught us some Hawaiian, and then they let us go there we did this 2-week observation, where we could go anywhere we wanted, and we could sit, and we could understand something. Those kids could talk so much better than us. It's like you feel like you're getting somewhere with a language, and then this little 5-year-old turns and he says something, and you're like, say it again. Over here, you're not supposed to speak English to them, so you're just kind of gesturing, and then he says about 6 times, and then you're like, okay, he's telling me his brother has the same laptop as mine. Okay, you know? But what was really neat was to watch how they were teaching their content, because they did math, they were doing greater than, less than, and they were using these little counting bears, and they were doing all kinds of little things. They were counting to 10, and what kinds of things plus what kinds of things equal 10. They used the Singapore math method, which I looked into a little bit. But the one thing that I liked is then they transitioned to this other sort of phase, and they have their day scheduled. And so as they transition to sort of the natural world type of thing, like so Hawaii and Southeast Alaska has some really similar things. And one of those things is you have a pretty limited landscape. You have the mountaintop, you have around the mountain, you have the highlands, you have the lowlands, you have the swampy areas, you have the beach, you have the shallows, you have the deep water. They have names for each of those places. And they would start like on the mountaintop. And they would say, here are some animals you might see. And this is all in Hawaiian, right? Here's some animals you might see. And then they pick like some of them, and then the kids draw them and write the name in Hawaiian. And the teacher's up there describing these things, like what the wild pigs are like. And then, so he's doing some behavior things and some other, like, do we eat them types of things. And then he shifts to what do they eat? Well, they eat this plant, and here's the plants that you're going to find up there. This one is one you can eat. This one's a medicine. Don't eat this one. And then they kind of move down. And they'd also say in the mountain it's colder, down here it's that. And so it was really neat to watch them. And then you could see that they had this sort of plan that went through at some of the older ages as well. So then I went into a first grade class, and they put this slide up that had about 20 different types of fish. And they say, okay, and they take turns. And so a little girl went up with a pointer, and she named all of the fish, and then everybody just repeated them after her. And then he brought a fish out of the fridge, you know, because they could just buy a bunch of little fish there at the store. And then he was talking about the eye and the nose and the gills and the flippers. And then he would talk about people's body parts. And it was really neat. And then he brought out a plant, and he was talking about the name of the different, you know, the leaf and the, you know, like a flower has the little thing that holds the petals. And so all these different sort of things, the stem of the plant. So it was pretty comprehensive. It was pretty amazing. But that was where I really saw people teaching content through an indigenous language. It was pretty fun.
Yeah. And I guess at that age, when you're thinking 3 to 5 year olds, you really are still teaching language. You're really just trying to get them to understand the words and the vocabulary that is associated with that.
Yeah.
And you could do some other simple things like over, under, like it was making me think when I was thinking preschool, when he was talking about the animals on the mountaintop, you could do something where they manipulate the different animals and they know the names of them.
Well, actually, yeah, like the Tlingit language, like Shaki, you're talking about on the top of the mountain, like, so it's already providing those
Directional.
labels. Yeah, the directional,
Yeah.
totally.
But have the kids learn some of the directionals, and then they get to play a game where they move the animal around, or you know those.
Yeah.
You know, what kind of things are and cold and warm. Those are basic preschool awareness content. That's content.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, the vocabulary
Put
goes
on the mountain.
Yeah.
Put the note in the valley.
Yeah, it really is the
Put
content.
it around.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, and when we went, the other thing I noticed in their daycare, their punanaleo, as I talked to some of the teachers, they said, "You guys sang all day. I didn't recognize any of. There weren't nursery rhymes." And they said we used to use nursery rhymes because they're so easy. They said, but then we noticed we were just always using these, and they said we got our own. We know how to sing. We know how to make songs. So they made all these Hawaiian songs specifically for. And so, and I saw at the teacher meeting too, the teachers would learn some new song, and one of the teachers had written it. But of course, everybody could play like a ukulele there. They're just like amazing. But then they would teach it all to each other, and they say, okay, go teach this to the kids this year. And then all the kids at all the punanaleos would know that song. So it was pretty fun. Okay.
So I've been doing that, I think it was in Cough and Cold Belt, or See Alaska, the Wasa CNT, you know, and then, yeah, I'm not getting it. Yeah, okay. Yeah.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
You know, and so they would echo that and they go, how are you, and then do the Tlingit with the English, and then for, you know, just so they get it. So that, I've been trying to do a song a week, but that has not happened. That was my, like, yes! But I've been singing Hans's song, the he, just like, because it's a Tlingit song rather than this idea of taking and, you know, a Western song and fitting Tlingit into it. But I just know that there's not many songs that I can sing at this point, so that's one that Hans has given me permission to do. And then I was looking on all of the See Alaska, and so that document I just sent out to everybody because I basically pulled off of it all of the songs that are in all of the units for the science and language units. But and they have a recording, but I can't seem to get it to work. So I don't know if it's my computer or.
It's a flash thing, right?
It's a flash read. It's really great because I went through cedar and spruce and hemlock, and they're great. I mean, the units are amazing. I hope that they're connected to the new science standards.
So the See Alaska.
Yeah. So
They should have those books in the library.
yeah, I just hope the new science curriculum. I hope that they are that all of that good work is brought into. We're all thinking about science now because of the new curriculum, and that we have so many new teachers. I don't know how many people know that they are there. They're just a wealth of really great materials. So, but there's like the hokey pokey with body parts and,
Oh, right.
you know, And then, I don't know, go down through the Muffin Man. I went, well, I don't know how much I'll be talking about muffins, but maybe there's another one. There's a ceremony. The Paddle Your Canoe song, which is like row, row, row your boat. Head and Shoulders, Hokey Pokey. So I thought that'd be great to teach body parts.
How old are these links that you sent?
Did you see?
Well, that
If
one
you
have
go
in
and see, it's not on my document. It's
the
on.
one you have in the email.
Oh, did I put it in the email?
I was for See Alaska, and then
Yeah.
it's the ending is SWF. So I was just trying to see what program would create.
It should be a Flash. Yeah,
SWF.
it's pretty outdated too. I don't think anybody uses.
So if you go to the,
So I know these are all.
it's not.
These were.
It's the other one. Okay, Alder and Cottonwood. That might. Yes. And then if you go to primary grades there under Tlingit language,
Oh.
and then you click on the audio, like I know.
Oh, what did that do? I don't think. I think this is something they used to call Shockwave Player,
Yeah, that's what it's
right?
Shock.
And I think it's.
Yeah, it's out.
So is that something See Alaska needs to work on?
Yeah. So I can let them know.
So you can download the materials but not the audio, is that what you're saying?
You can't open the audio.
Okay.
Because they have a track for each one, and it'll say background to this song, which is like, and it's excited to hear about that. And then they actually have the audio for the song, because I just wanted, then I could hear it and make sure it's doing it correctly.
So I don't even know what that would open. So yeah, because I can open it in a Flash player, but it's just a blank screen. So.
And I think a lot of those songs are going to be, Nancy Douglas and take little songs, rhythms, and put words to them.
Yeah, sounds like a great.
Wow. Well, yeah. I mean, that would be. Well, I mean, I know that they have them because they have these too, and they have CDs, and so maybe they just need to.
Maybe just need
Update
to
there.
I'll call. Would it be? Do you know who I would talk to at See Alaska? Is it
Jackie Kukash?
She's still there, isn't
Is she
she?
So she's
there?
wrapping up, and then there's a new person that they just hired. There's a new guy that just started.
Oh, they hired somebody?
Yeah.
Okay.
He used to be the superintendent or principal in Cake.
Is Davina Cole doing education stuff there? I mean, might she be a little easier to get a hold of than Jackie?
Maybe
She's doing art stuff.
Maybe Lonnie Hodge. She's in the language program, but or no, not Katrina.
Katrina.
What about Phyllis Carlson is in the education realm too, isn't she?
Phyllis is kind of like, co-director with Jackie for a while.
Oh, really? Yeah.
All right. So so that's my long term, and then for the lesson we do for the kindergarten and first grade, we do a lot of like 4-beat pattern commands, like elbow up and forward, and then they go it back, elbow up and forward, sailboat, float that boat, waterfall, so we just do different like singing patterns, and they sing it back, and then as they do it, and we use images of mud puddles versus waterfalls and mountain tops, and I just thought I could change the pitch and how long I sing something so that I can get the long vowel sounds, so maybe those are a longer note, and then for high tones just have the pitch come up, and low tones, so just change those 4-beat patterns to make sort of a melodic to match the short and long
Was-
high and low.
Short and longer is gonna be the most important. In our songs, even the Tlingit traditional songs, the tone marks often they go away because of the melody, you know, but the short and long definitely have to. I'm not saying get rid of your tone marks.
No.
Your tone marks,
Yeah.
your tone marks.
Well, I did that with Wasai
That was
because
when we
the
got
one it used to be Wasai or something, and then so we changed it to Wasai because sa is short and was long, but in the recording it flipped.
Long, yeah.
Yeah, so Carly and I were going, well, maybe can we change it slightly so that the wa is longer and then the shorter to reflect the language rather than the song. And so that's what we did. And I thought, okay, so for these sing back patterns, which are all, you know, in second person, like just singing back commands that they, you know, repeat, that maybe I could do tonal patterns and longer note values based on whether they're long vowels or high tones.
And you sent me a list of things we're looking for.
Yeah, I was gonna say,
I
we were
did,
real
if
impressed
you-
with that.
If you go, it's on page 4.
Okay.
There, that integrated lesson. for
Oh, there we go.
violin.
Yeah.
So I looked up as much as I could,
Uh-huh.
you know, but then of course, I don't know if getting into the second person command, like what would you add to all of that? But I just looked up the nouns.
Yeah, because most of them would need verbs. I think I had started to make a little list, and so these would be fun as far as what we're trying to get them to do and to say, as far as what our expectations are. And then it kind of depends on what you're saying. There's usually some command like look at it or extend this or something like that. So yeah, these will be fun. So I think I had started some of them, like there's a command for rest. So for like as far as how to go about finding some of this stuff on your own with my flash
Do
player.
you use Yanchi stuff, or does that mean to literally like lay down and rest?
Yeah, Yanchista means to lay down.
Yeah.
So there's one for rest, but
This is like rest.
well,
Although
here's
when the kids
this.
do it, we go rest.
doesn't work.
Ready position, but it is definitely.
Yeah, I don't think that works.
It is, and we sing it over and over again, and then a scale has 8 notes, so we do, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. So I was thinking we could be doing Tlingit work, the numbers, and then Hans came in the other day, and we were doing pinky push-ups on their bow, and he would go, click, and we would click, and we'd count how many times their pinky. We just had a backbeat going on, but it was singing back the numbers, and so yeah, it's been great having Hans, and then also just as new kids come to our community, we had somebody from Portland, and we were like, let's welcome her. So we sang the, how are you, and talked about this place and people of this place, and just the pride of our kids to be able to share and sing the language and speak it too. So it's been fun. Yeah.
You could call him Nakasan if you're learning Tlingit.
What was it?
Nakasan.
No.
Nakasan.
No.
Yeah. Naakil period A-A-N. Nakasan.
That's Hans's name.
Hey, can you do Mary's name?
Oh, yeah.
I spelled Lance's May wrong for 8 years. I had high tone on the E for forever.
Dash Ginny. Dash Ginny. Son loves that name.
I love it too.
Yeah.
and then Jessica Chester, say boot.
I told him 50 way oh.
This is Jessica.
Cheesh, say boot. Say boot.
Say
Nakishan. Dash Ginny. Kune. So we'll transition after we get around and hear from everybody else. We'll look up a couple verbs, but what kind of names you guys have or you picked out or possibly thought about. So here's rest. So we, the one way we can do is this Tlingit verbs database. And we can, if we push, we can do a search and rest shows up. And so then we can click on the verb root, then click on the yellow. So when you click on the blue root, it's going to show you what verbs they have listed under that root. A root can have several verbs under it. The way you make a new verb in Tlingit is by changing the classifier, or I guess you could say adding a classifier. So every verb has to have a root and a classifier. So the ways you can make a new verb is by putting a different classifier on it, adding an object or a subject, but once you see it in there, it has to be in there, so that has to have a subject. Or by adding what we call a thematic prefix. And a thematic prefix is something that appears in between the object and the subject, and it has some kind of meaning. The most common ones would be ka, which is a horizontal surface. You could think of it as on something, and ya, which is a vertical surface, and you could think of it as the face of something. So let's try and sort of visualize those two, ka and ya. Okay, so when we see these, they're usually going to have high tones. When they're in the verb, they won't have the high tone mark. But so if we think everybody's kind of like this, let's say ka, 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 ya, 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 ya. So these are a couple of things that you're going to see built into verbs, on it, the face of it, right? And you'll see them quite a bit. So each of these, they'll show you the different verbs that are here. So here's one. If we click anywhere in this yellow, it'll expand, and then this will be your command form. You're going to have two. 2S is singular, 2P is plural. So usually as teachers, we're always looking at the plurals because we're talking to groups. But if you're talking to one person, it's a little different. So to just say rest, you'll say ishsa, 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 ishsa. And don't tell them not to rest because it's very long. But here's some things, and you can usually get these, they call them imperatives. There's an exclamation point, not because you yell it, because we use those in Tlingit to mark that it's a command of some sort. That's usually what we're doing with that particular thing. And then there's a couple other, if you're going to sort of elbows up and stuff, it's probably going to be, we can find some different verbs for that. But here's some places to just kind of look around. Raise your hand is sort of similar, although when you raise your hand, it's sort of coming up like the whole thing. Okay.
So the ta that I had is not correct.
That's a sleep verb.
Yeah, so ta is to sleep. So the ta in that case could be to lay down, or it could be to put somebody to bed. But you could, there has to be a living thing. But yeah, that's
I think when we did put your hand up and stuff when we were phone speakers early 2000s, it would just be like kindage and
those are
without necessarily a verb. It's just kind of hand up.
Yeah, so those are things you could do. So
like t-shirt in Kindeyi T-shirt. Put your elbow up.
So similar to these two, so we have cup and yup, which is on the horizontal and the vertical. So this one, we sort of do this upward motion and we say kinde,
Kinde.
yinde,
Yinde.
kinde,
Kinde.
yinde,
Yinde.
kinde,
Kinde.
yinde.
Yinde.
There's going to be related ones that we'll see all over the place. K, yay, diki, diyi. Those all have to do with these upward, downward motions. So yeah, you could say kinde, yi, and then body part. Ki would be the elbow. So those are things. So
T-shirt, yeah,
yeah,
Same thing?
Yeah, it's sort of like the bone,
Okay.
and so E would be just this whole kind of area.
It seems like a good thing for you to repeat the upward, because right, a lot of their motions are going to be up or down.
Yeah.
And they have the similar
Yeah.
term that they can learn.
Yeah, so kindei jin, right? So that could be upwards, downwards. Or you can just have general ones, like kinde could be like raise it up or something like that. So they're shortcuts, and I think those shortcuts are good for us as learners, and they're good for the students, so that as you're learning Tlingit, you try to avoid verbs. It's like, it's a game, how to speak without verbs. And until you start to sort of, there's ones that you start to get a hold of, and as you go further along, they kind of start to make sense, but verbs are really fun in Tlingit. It's like boxes within boxes. It's like those little Matryoshka dolls.
Oh, yeah.
You're like, oh yeah, I think I get that. I'm like, oh, you got that? Well, here's the oh, okay, I think I got, okay, well, here you go. And guess what? It never ends. It's pretty fun. Okay.
And the E, sorry,
what's that?
the E.
We will all.
Oh, yi is yalls.
Oh, yeah.
So then,
Okay.
thank you. So yeah, this is yalls. And then you'd have a body part or something in there. Right? Kindei jin, yindei jin. Kindei ti, or ti shu, yindei ti.
Jin would be, everybody raise your hand.
Yeah, raise your hand.
Jin.
And what you'll find, there's verbs to say that thing, but then it's faster to say and it's faster to teach.
So bank robbery.
Yeah. Or you
nice.
want to be a Tlingit police officer? Okay.
Could you say it again?
Oh, say it one more time.
What would be raising your hand and putting your hand up?
Oh, hold on. Let me mute myself. There, I was getting a little bit of interference. Okay, one more time.
Can you say one more time what the phrase is for raising your hand up and putting your hand down?
So we have, sorry, I don't know if this is picking up the board.
I
I can see some of it, but
So the first one, so we have upward and downward. So we'll do kindei jin,
Kindei
jin.
yindei jin,
Yinde jin.
kindei jin,
Kinde jin.
yindei jin.
Yinde jin.
Jin, J-I-N, the high tone, jin. And a jin, Tlingit body parts are fun because a jin is a hand, but it also means the whole arm. Us is a foot, but it also means the whole leg. So it's usually there's these sort of defaults. You're usually saying foot.
You can't really use them without pronouns unless they're not attached to you.
Yeah, and so for jin, you want to have a pronoun built in there. So what we'll see in beginning Tlingit and then in other things like that is you'll see some nouns, or if you look it up in the dictionary, and there's a long dash before it. Like if we go to the sort of the dictionary that's, oops, and we look up, well, we see one right here with it. So there has to be something you're following. And same with the body part. There has to be something that possesses that body part. And this isn't that different in English, right? Like, there, for example, you could say, well, I hurt hand, right? And there's just something missing there. I hurt my hand, your hand, our hand. You know, so things like that. And so there's fancy terms for them, but body parts and kinship terms are the place to start thinking about that. And just same with, and we use these, they're called inalienable. We use them in English all the time, right? So if I say, hey, have you seen my keys? Yeah, they're on. Right, and so there needs to be something that follows that. But in Tlingit, you would say there was usually something before. So they come before instead of after. So in Tlingit grammar would say, your keys are table on, right? Or good. Right. That's how we take care of those types of things. Okay, Frank.
Well, last year started for the Earth Scholars. They come to the university for their enrichment. So I did a leadership and advocacy class that the kids came to, and they come every Tuesday. These are the Earth Scholar kids at Juneau Douglas High School and avid students from Thunder Mountain. So they've asked me to do it again this semester. We haven't started yet. They're so I started putting together, you know, the leadership thing is pretty Western stuff, and so I'm trying to put some leaders in there and all that kind of stuff. But I want to dig in deeper now and try to put in some vocabulary here and there. Nice. But I'm having some trouble with that because how do you try to just in terms of and this is the question. Is it just right now exposing the kids to the vocabulary of what's going on? But because it's pretty technical content that because I'm trying to. These are high school students, and I'm trying to figure out how do I do that. You know, and that's my not frustration, but I'm trying to go beyond just the using just putting in different faces or different objects or different things that might pertain to that Native students can recognize and everybody else can recognize as well, because being part of being here on the land. But I'm trying to fit in some of the vocabulary as well, and what would be appropriate so it doesn't seem that I'm patronizing this. Does that make sense?
Right.
Because I wanted to make it fluid, so it's just part of it, you know. And I'm really liking what you guys are doing, because at the elementary level it just becomes part of it, and it flows into the lesson. Where what I'm trying to do is, it seems that it's not flowing as much. It's just like I'm just putting it in, like it's just an add-on. I just don't want it to be an add-on. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm. One thing that I do with middle school students at Sea Alaska a lot is talk about the four cornerstone or house posts. What do they do?
Oh yeah, house posts.
So like talking about wuchia, meaning balance, and in their reference they mean balance as in reciprocity between clans. But one of the other corner posts is also ha'ani, our land.
I like that.
Hasatsini, they have it wrong on there. It should be Hasatsini, our strength. Hashagun, those who came before us, those of us who are here now, and those of us who are going to come in the future. And what I usually do is have the kids work through those terms and how are they connected. So
I like that. So that's that's a lot. I like that. So if I can get more of that, well, it seems like you could move it. Okay.
Well, I think it was Voices on the Land that actually worked through those, specifically with middle school students. You know, so then I would have.
But that incorporates really well. I like that. That balance and the house post, because that seems like
Yeah, and it seems like there's a lot of rich ideas within those that I would love to explore more than, I mean, just.
Yeah.
What I found was they're not individual, like they have them as individuals, but they're all connected. Like you can talk about balance within clans and people, but what about balance with our land? Ha'ani, and finding balance within Hashidun, and then also the strength, our strength, how does that connect with balance?
And is that on the site somewhere?
No, but they do have the 4 panels in the exhibit downstairs in the Sealaska building. I don't know if it's on the Sealaska.
There's a flyer.
I have a poster, but maybe it's spelled wrong.
Well,
Designing the flyer.
Because I think that's perfect for what I'm trying to
Actually,
do.
it's not there.
You want to bring up clan leadership.
I know, yeah.
And then the leadership that we have now versus clan leadership, because that's not going to necessarily be the roles of these kids.
Right.
How much it's changed and been westernized and so on and so forth. But if really, when you're talking about these things, you're talking about leadership within these things.
And it's universal.
And it's universal.
Yeah.
It should be, it's among all of our people and cultures.
So I'd like to get the resource for that. If there's a flyer, if there's
well, they've got a poster. I've got some in my office that sort of, I think it describes, they have them in Haida and some Algach. So Tlatsini should have a possessive marker on it. Wooch and whoosh are interchangeable. Which one you use depends on whether the next thing starts with a vowel or a consonant. But those are sort of, it's not hard and fast rules. But then there's also there's a variety of rules in Tlingit too that are like, this is how it is, but this is how it's trended, right? So usually if the next word starts with a vowel, you'd usually use wooch. If it starts with a consonant, you'd usually use whoosh. And then what it means is together. Whoosh means together. And it pops up, it's a pronoun, is what we call it. But what it does is it changes the verb, right? So you could say something like yejitune, we're working. But maybe you're working on one thing, I'm working on a different thing. But if we had one blanket kind of in the middle of this room, and I said whoosh yejitune, we're all working together on this one same thing. And so sometimes there's the meaning, it gets a little bit muddy, but whenever you see like whoosh or whooch, like you see whooch-in, or whoosh-ja-in, that's what they're doing. Is that whoosh part is together. And so it's a really good, powerful one in Tlingit that's used a lot of times for like unity statements and things like that. And we have to jump around a little bit. I know I'm having you guys watch these classes and do other stuff, but when we get together here, our time is a little bit limited, but if there's certain things you're looking for, we can help find some of those things. And I know when you guys send me emails, I'm thinking about things and trying to figure out how to do it, and sometimes working through them. Another kind of fun conceptually thing is senses of direction. And we touched on this with, so right here, these things right near us, the space we say is ya. Everybody say ya.
Yeah.
Ya. Ya.
Yeah.
Wet.
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 Ya.
Yeah.
Wet.
Wet.
So you're going to see these built into a whole bunch of things. So you might hear yadu, yata, yag, and you might hear wadu, waita, wade. And those are all built on these, and they're always relative to the speaker. So wherever I am, the ya and the we, it's always referred to my own personal perspective, right? And then there's one that is ha, and that's like around us as a group. Then there's a second set of these that have to do with two things. They're around it, one's near it, towards it, from it, on top of it, below it, those types of things. Then there's a third set of directional things, which all have to do with this fixed point in the world, which is where the ocean meets the shore. And this is where it gets, these are concepts in Tlingit that are really fun, because the ones that you use depend on where you're at. So there's places you could be in the interior, you could be on the shore, you could be out to sea, or you could be in a building. Those are kind of the 4 places you can be that change your senses of direction. And it's taken me a long time to sort of talk to speakers and try and figure this stuff out. But like, we're in a classroom here on the Juneau campus, Akwan Anikak. But we are in the inland from the Tlingit perspective because we have to travel to get to the ocean. So we can go, so if we look at this little dude who's walking this way, let me use the pointer. So if we look at this guy or girl, they're going Ikde. And so Ikde would be from the inland to the ocean. And then if they're there and they got onto a boat, they can go Dakde. Dak is from the shore out to sea. If they turned around, they could go Yan. We talked about this one, Yan. So they can go Yande, but you can only go Yan from the ocean. You have to be on the ocean to do that.
Not on a lake?
No, that's actually a really good question, because a lake doesn't have that. And so this gets really conceptually really interesting. The ocean has this thing that extends all around the ocean. We call it niche. Niche, and that's the beach basically. But there's no niche around the lake. There is the Akayah, the shoreline. That's what you get around a river or a lake. Because for the Tlingit perspective, the ocean that's directional point, that's where we center the compass. Even if you live in the inland, you have these terms. So then once you get to the sea, you can go Dak Day, right? And so there's Dak, and from Dak you can go Ik, from Ik you can go Dak, from Dak you can go Yan. So here's these sort of 3 main areas that we have in the Tlingit consciousness. From the outside of a building, you can go Yi, that's inside of a building. And then if you're inside of the building, other people can come Neish. But you only say Neish Gu if you're inside of the place already. Right? So these are just little fun, like brain tangler things to think about perspective and space and where you are in the world.
So even a super big lake like Atlan?
You can go on Lake Superior, you could go on
a sea? How about a sea?
If it was saltwater, then they would probably consider it. But for us, it's hard to take these perspectives and bring them to other places. But as far as where we are here, because if we think of it, we never ever needed north, south, east, west. We knew where everything was based on getting to the ocean and getting to the inland. So, but it gets pretty interesting, and they do this stuff in Hawaii too. When we learn how to drive, when we learn Hawaiian, we'd go for lunch, and he would only give us his commands in Hawaiian. So we never crashed, and we always got to where we wanted to go. So, but it was a crash course, but not literally. So, these are fun. Okay. Ralph,
What are we doing?
we're just kind of sharing what's on our minds as far as a lesson that we might be using or developing that incorporates Tlingit, or that we want to do basically for a midterm. And our midterm is supposed to be 2 weeks from now, but I think we'll probably end up moving.
Well, thinking about some of the work that we're doing now in the school district with the professional development of artful teaching, one of the series of activities talks about the tools of the actor and the skills of the actor. So about the body, the voice, and the imagination.
Mm-hmm.
So incorporating the nouns of those tools,
mm-hmm.
and then the skills of concentration and cooperation. And I like to add expression in there as well.
Oh.
That's ultimately, as actors, what we want to do.
Right.
And then talking about, teaching the vocabulary of those, and interjecting the Tlingit words into kind of this very basic, what do you call them?
Tools of the.
Yeah, well, yeah. I mean, these basic approach to teaching with drama and theater.
Right.
For teachers and for students. Though the more metaphorical ideas I'm interested in, like tools of the actor, would be interesting to explore the idea of tools.
Huh.
And if there are,
Yeah, it'd be just shagun, right?
and to think in those terms of, yeah, we're artists, and so we're, as performing artists, we need to use these tools to make our art form. So looking into that. And then several things about the voice, because that's really important for acting, and thinking about projection, being heard by your audience, articulation, and emphasis. And so
in storytelling, how does that, how's that incorporated, like Robin was saying, as a storyteller, using voice, using gesture, all of that in traditional things?
I was wondering, is jishagun, like when you talk about jishagun as tools, they're usually tools that you're using with your hands, but jit would be like the kind of the definition of the hand tools. But like these tools are not jif shagun, they're more like shut or two shagun, or
it gets interesting because if you said like, so we'll have to look at acting and come up with probably a word for actor. But if I had the name for actor and I said if I said shagun, I would expect to hear about his ancestry or her ancestry.
Yeah.
Because this is a really interesting term. So shagun literally means its components, its history. So if I had some kind of thing like if I had a wallet and I said "Ideka kwashanik a shagun dot," I'm going to tell you about this thing's history. And so here's the wallet, and so the wallet might not be a good example. Maybe like this jar. Yeah, it's shagun, the history, and so I might tell you like this jar belonged to my mother or something. You know, there might be some story, or it could be the shagun of something a little more complicated, like a phone. Like if I had a phone. If I took it apart and laid all the parts out, that would be its shagun. So when you say shagun, I'm usually talking about my lineage. I'm going to tell you about my mother, my father. I'm going to tell you about my grandpa, my grandma. That's shagun. Shagun pretty much always means our ancestors. But the shagun, and so I think it could work though, because we would talk about the history, the tools, the components of what it means to act, to be an actor.
If you talk about like if you're setting the table and you're putting plates and forks and spoons out, you would say shagun, like these are the tools for food, right? You're talking about the jishagun, shagun, food tools.
If you're working on your jewelry, you might say, jishaguni, hand me my tool, and it would be like a knife or a little hammer or something.
It would be,
Huh. So if we
about the tools, because we've, with Voice on Land, we've gone through,
there's another.
Kata it, or whatever you would say.
This is another thing that would be a kunugu. And this would be something's behavior, something's, like there's this phrase they'll say, Chayiku genki kaktusaku adehas kunuguye. They'll say, we're going to begin to understand a little bit of the way they used to do things. And they're referring to our ancestors when they use that phrase. But hasknuguye, adeasknuguye would be the way they used to do things. So knugu could be the way that somebody does something. And so that, though, there could be something in there as well. Acting is kind of a fun one. We might have to talk to some of the old people and see what they think, you know, because you do have this. So like uwanuk would be to act like bast uwanuk. And you could say, you know, katat uwanuk. So there are some things, you know, unkt uwanuk ikash. Your nephew is acting like a baby. But there's another sort of, and so the verb root, sorry, if we go back to here and we think about, so we see nuke, that verb root means to behave, to act a certain way. But you know, that kind of acting, we're kind of talking about stop acting a fool, you know, that kind of acting, like that you're behaving this way. But to actually, to do acting is a little bit of a different sort of thing.
Because I remember Walter Soloff would say, Wasakianuk is more like, what are you up to? Like, not what are you doing, but what have you been up to?
Right.
There's a difference in that verb.
Tend, yeah.
So there's another fun one we go to, which is, and this one might be, I don't know, if I were to vote this, I might vote for this one. So this verb to pretend or to make believe is autliyek. But like it also means like I'm going to act like I know what I'm doing. Because the verb root here is raven.
Yeah.
Right? Like the verb would literally be he ravened. Right? He pretended he was working and that he knew his job. Right? It's a very fitting type of thing. Right? And so yeah, there's shkashiyeh, which is to lie. Right? And so acting involves a little bit of, you know, there's got to be truth to it, but there's got to be lying. You know, there's a lot of things you could explore here. Autliyeh would probably be a pretty fun one.
But wouldn't that just be like a storyteller? Because you have people that can tell stories very well and they act out what somebody has done in the, and then there's me that can't tell a story.
Right. Yeah, so yeah, the components of the story. And so there's this other one that's a pretty cool noun that's not getting used a whole lot, which I'd have to, again, go talk to some of the elders and see. Let me just find it. So the actions of something is da'itnagu. And this one is an interesting one. Let me see if I can find it up here. It won't be just in the English section. So there's this one is kind of interesting, and I want to talk to some, but you know there could be, you know, like the actions of the storyteller. That would be one way to sort of put that thing together. The behavior of a storyteller. So those would be some of the things. Because yeah, when you're acting, you're like living a story, right? So those are some things that we could look at, and I can. I'll ask some folks, like if you're around Kakashat, maybe see if she has some thoughts. I can see if Dasya has some thoughts. I could ask Marge when I see her again.
I have just a few other ideas that it would be fun to pursue too. We have, this is, for me, as an artist, this is something really important in as an actor, being transparent, what we call being very transparent, or making the invisible visible. So the inner world of feelings and thoughts it's the actor's job to communicate that to the audience. And most of that is physical presence and gesture and action, attitude in the body. So that I would like to explore that concept of.
You could probably say, something like
Share
that.
to see through, or
Yes, or to allow people to see in, or to bring what's inside out. Any of those.
Well, so there's a couple things. So when we say tu wu in Tlingit, and you'd have a possessive pronoun before. Ach tu wu, e tu wu, ha tu wu, yi tu wu. What you're gonna get here, and did I give you guys my little pronoun cards? Did you guys get pronoun cards in here? Sarah, I'll have to get your address so I can send you one. So these are little, I got this idea from Wonky Charles, who teaches UPIC. And he made one for UPIC. They have a different grammar, but he made these little cards. And they're very small, so they will challenge your small vision. But I have larger versions as well. And he says, this is your new American Express. Don't leave home without it. Your sort of phrase. And so when I say possessive pronoun, then you can look down and you'll see, and I'll put on the screen what this thing looks like. And I'll put on the screen, I think I ordered a larger version maybe, or I printed a larger version. So hold on one second. But the idea is if I say something and say, oh yeah, well this is a possessive pronoun, then you look on this card and it tells you what the possessive pronouns are.
Do you have it in electronic?
Yeah, and I have electronic versions of this. I'll put it on our website.
We can zoom.
I have full page size ones, so.
Well, these ones are the things that you
the loops.
So this is the one with the English on it, so we can see. So when we said tu wu, first we got to come back to that because we got to explain this concept. Whenever we get to feelings and thoughts and stuff like that, tu wu can mean your feelings, your thoughts, your desires, your spirit. It could be any of those things. And so there's a possessive pronoun that can come before it. So then you say my, and then when we learn how to do feelings, we'll see, when we talk about feelings in Tlingit, it's really interesting because you'll say like, I feel happy. And so when you're saying that in English, you are a subject, right? Because an object would be me feel happy, or happy is me, or something like that, right? So we think about subjects or doers, objects or receivers, basically. In Tlingit, you're almost always either an object or you're talking about your feelings in this sort of way, right? And so it's really interesting because you would say, my feeling is happy, or my spirit is happy, maybe is another way to think of it.
You say my inner being.
My inner being, right? It doesn't have to get too deep. But that tu wu is a really important word. And then you could say tu means inside of something, right? And we're going to see this pop up in verbs. So you could say tundatani are thoughts, yuchatangi are speech, tu and khe. Khe is a mouth, tu is inside. So you could say something like atrasati away tu, which would translate as there's really something inside of you. Like there's just something there. There's something special there. That could be some kind of phrase. I heard about it where artists were talking about their art and they'd say atrasati atawe. It's something where there's something really inside of it. So if we took a word like tu wu, so then we could take a list like this and we see, we use these little codes, and these codes are like, me, us, you, y'all, I should use the pointers. That's what I mean. So here we got, SG is singular, PL is plural. So if we think about this, me, us, you, y'all, she or he, it, them. And Tlingit has these fourth person pronouns, so just brace yourself. Sometimes people do it, and sometimes it happens to people. Sometimes there's just something, right? And then here's the whoosh down there, and then there's another one, which is chush, which is to the self, right? So we're not going to worry too much about those, but we'll look at these. So a pronoun, we'll look at two of them. The independent pronoun would be if someone says, you knocked on the door, kuch, kuch, kuch. Adusawe, who is it? Chataya, it's me. Wuhan awe, it's us. They're not used a whole lot in Tlingit. They're used to maybe call attention to who you're talking to, or you might say, she's going to the store. Chatkoa, just ne, me, I'm just going to stay home. Right, so if you're indicating like we're talking about somebody else, they're used for these to call attention. When they tell some of those big migration stories and stuff, they might say, Uhanaya yashukach adi. Us, the shukach adi. So we'll start with these ones. And the other way that these are used is they say, Gusu, where is? You might say, Yaduchat, here I am. Yadu Uhan, here we are. Weidu Has, there they are. But they're not used outside of a whole lot of those. Once you start tying them to other things, they got to shift to different pronouns. Right, so this is where we get I, me, mine type of stuff. Okay, so let's just start with me. I'll say it, repeat after, and let me make this a little bit bigger. Chat, 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 Uhan, 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 Uhan. And I point when I teach pronouns, but it's not always polite to go around pointing. I will say this is called chich, which means points. So I don't. But so when we're doing this, first person is I'm talking about myself. Second person is I'm talking about you. Third person is I'm talking about this person. I'm giving you the awesome compliments about this third person. So I use one finger for that, and then I say I'm talking about us, I'm talking about y'all, I'm talking about them. Okay, so these are just little cues, and so the ways that we can sort of, if you want to do singular and plural, we could do that. We'll work through all of these, and I'll show you a couple tricks to help you remember them. Okay, so us. Uhan, 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 Wa'eh, 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 Yuhan, 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 Huh, 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 Huh. Huh, 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 hus, 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 hus. I'm going to skip the non-human one. We're not going to worry about that. Okay, right? So if we're doing just the one singular, we can do this. We go chat wa'eh huh. Chat wa'eh huh. Chat wa'eh huh. Uhan, Yuhan, Hus.
Uhan, Yuhan, Hus.
Uhan, Yuhan, Hus.
Uhan, Yuhan, Hus.
And so that's them. You know, we don't use them a whole lot, but you'll see that as you sort of some of the things that you can do as well is you can go find Tlingit stories and read them. And just start. One of the fun things about reading Tlingit stories as you learn Tlingit is make photocopies of it and start circling the words like, hey, I know that word. Hey, I know that word. Hey, I wonder what this one is. Start seeing how many you can start looking up because this you got to do this Scatter is a shotgun approach, right? Because Tlingit it's a challenge. It's not around in too many places. You got to do a whole bunch of stuff because you might get yourself fatigued in one area, but then you want to try and sort of get into some others. So possessive really shows relationship. One of the big things it does. This is how we start talking about body parts, kinships, like my mother, my father, and we start talking about like possessing things like, hey, that's my cheeseburger, right? That's my salmon. And so these are some things that we'll learn how to do. And so they change, right? And so as we see them, they change. And this is to whom it may concern, right? This is the kind of stuff that teachers of English worry about. But these are things we got to think about how they kind of work. So when we get into things that are mine, now we already learned to. So now we'll talk about my feelings, we'll talk about your feelings, we'll just work all this stuff out. Ach. 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 Ha. 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 And that's a big one. Right? Once we see all these words out there, ha-shagun, ha-kusti, ha-ani, those are big. Sometimes those change a whole concept. Like you can have something like shuka, which means out in front of something. That's really all it means is in front of something, right? Like if we're in a boat and there's some porpoises swimming in front of us, I might say chich away ha-yagu-shuka. There's porpoises in front of our boat. But when we say ha-shuka, now we just said all of us, everything that's ever been and everything that will ever be and everything we are right now, right? It's this huge, it pushes into these big conceptual things. Kuste means to exist. Ha-kusti, that means like Tlingit culture, Tlingit way of life. So the ha is a big one. And also, it's good to share, right? We like to share. Yeah. Ye. 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 Du. 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 Hastu. 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 So when you're learning Tlingit, you learn how to pronounce things, you learn how to read and write, you start learning a bunch of names for things, you start learning some phrases, and then you move into digesting and internalizing big lists like this. So that, and so these are, independents are used kind of rarely, right? Like here I am, oh, it's them that we were talking about. Possessives are used a lot, right? It happens, we say like, it rained on me, right? And so, my mom told me, right? So kinships, possessions, like, clans talking about the things that they own and stuff like that, all of these are going to come up. Talking about your feelings, talking about wanting things, this is going to come up as well. There's some pretty fun things in Tlingit too, like, it's hard to say I like, it's really hard to say something like, hey, I like your shirt. Because the only way you could say like, your shirt is nice. That's the easier way to say it. Because a straight like, I like your shirt would be saying, I want your shirt. Right? So Hawaiian's the same thing. In Hawaiian they said if someone came in here and they said, I want your shirt, they'd probably be like, then they'd give you the shirt, and then you leave, and then they'd be like, why did he want my shirt? What is wrong with you? So I don't think that would really happen, but there's just some things. So let's go back to, everybody say, tu-wu. 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 Ach tu-wu. Ach tu-wu. Ha tu-wu. Ha tu-wu. It tu-wu. It tu-wu. Ye tu-wu. Ye tu-wu. Do tu-wu. Do tu-wu. Hastu tu-wu. Hastu tu-wu. So these, basically when we communicate stuff, You know, this is a lot of communication. Talking about me, talking about us, talking about you, talking about y'all, talking about them, talking about him or her. You'll also see these aren't gendered. They're not gendered pronouns. The closest thing would be ka is a person and ka is also people. So that one's kind of close to, you know, the default, sort of like since the dawn of man, you know, whatever type of stuff. So that's how those are working. If we did the same thing, so looking at, you know, Koneoti, Marcia Hott, she used to encourage us to learn these things in threes. So we go back to the first chart and we say Chat wa'eh hu. Uhan, Yuhan, Hus. Ach, du. Ha, ye, hastu. Okay. Let's see. What were you?
I've been practicing with the kids, some of the students still with your video and the YouTube video on Tlingit Sounds. And as we're moving along in Marty Dean's class, we're going to see the kutia.
Oh, nice.
Walking around town and looking at them. And so today, since I'm going to be gone next week, I went and took photographs because I was told that not to use the photos off the internet because it could present some problems.
Oh, copyright?
Copyright.
Yeah.
So today I went and took the photographs, and the kids will read about the photographs, and then we'll create our own brochures of the kutia, and then we're going to go and tour them downtown.
Awesome.
So.
Yeah, and there's lots of things on those
Yes.
kutia, so we can get the names of those things. And your comment reminds me. So one of the things that I wanted to do was to have this Tlingit workbook. And so in order to have the workbook, like we had to own the rights to all the images, because I've been using just any old kind of, just whatever I'd find I'd use. But now, so I got a lot of stock images. So what I can do with you guys is share a folder, share access to a folder, and you can use any of these images that are in there, especially for language stuff.
Even the kutia that are downtown, that's the ones that we really wanted.
Yeah,
because we're going to stop at JDHS, walk down to Govelt building.
Right.
Then, yeah.
For that, your best bet is to go and take the picture yourself.
Yeah.
Because then you took the picture, the kutia is there, and I don't think you won't run into any issues that I could foresee. But I was thinking of other things because we're looking for pictures of things.
Okay, because all of your stuff in here that were printed or belong to you.
You can use any of them.
Okay.
I'll share the folder. You can use those for. I mean, if you're making T-shirts and selling them for $30, I really agree to that. For education stuff, I think that's great because if it's, I'm not saying they all have to be the same, but if they're learning these words and they see those same images, it does help with these association things, I think. Okay. Sarah, how about you?
So my thoughts are real similar to Roblin's. I also don't teach in a classroom, but I do the Artists in Schools program, and so I do residencies that are usually 2 weeks long, and I'm usually working with all the students in one particular school. So the first 2 weeks of November, I'm going to be in Homer doing a residency at an elementary school, K through 6. And that'll be my first opportunity to really kind of test out some ideas and try some things with those guys. So, so there's a few things that are really interesting to me. Some of them Roblin talked about. Some of them are lists of words. Like there are some possibly some command type words or you all type words for actions that we would do. And I just started putting together a list. Maybe I'll send that list to you and see if you have any thoughts. But, you know, some word, like some nouns like floor and ceiling and circle. And then, you know, some commands that have to do with like everybody standing or everybody sitting, everybody moving. A lot of what I do is movement based and dance based. So some of the concepts that I teach to students are new to them anyway. So for example, this residency that I'm going to do is based around the idea of telling a story with your body. So I teach the concept of a tableau, you know, a frozen picture that tells a story. And then students basically are going to put together series of tableaus or series of gestures to tell their own stories that they make in small groups. And I am really curious about if there are, you know, either words that could tell those concepts that I could just teach, you know, as the word for that concept, or if there are also concepts, Tlingit concepts of movement and storytelling that could be brought into that teaching.
Okay, geez. Yeah, so we can probably work through a list of things. Maybe once, if you send them to me, I can sort of take a look and try and come up with some ideas. Because yeah, some of these things we might have to come up with different ways to describe them, or you know, there's also like things you could say, like as you look up a verb, there's some really fun stuff that you can, like especially for teachers. So there's this kind of shortcut where you can say ade, and then you have verb. This is the basic sort of thing. So ade verbi ye. And what this construction does is it's saying the way that verb happens, right? So this is kind of interesting because you could look up sort of a verb, like for example, let's say we're talking about dancing. So the same thing here where we looked up rest, we can look up dance. We click on the root, we see there's one verb there. Click on the yellow to get the verb, and we can have some different things. You all dance. You are dancing. So if we said and we're talking about a class of people, so we say so so this is you all are dancing, right? And there's a command form for up here. Would be y'all dance, but there's a command form. But then you have you all are dancing. But we have ade, yeah, and this would be the way you all are dancing. So this is a kind of fun next level stuff to do. I know you guys are just getting started, but these are some different things you could do to say, well, let's talk about this. Let's talk about the way you guys are dancing. And so there's different things where you're not talking about that verb, but you're talking about how that verb is happening, the way it is happening. And that's a pretty fun, like, it's a really, you know, there's a few different parts to it where you put those on the either side of the verb, and now it's just become the way that verb is happening, is what you're talking about. So there's some different stuff we can look at with that. There's some different things, thinking about kind of what we might possibly accomplish here. You know, my goal is not really to run you guys through some sort of exam, but more to collaborate on some education projects. So in thinking of that, I just sort of threw a schedule together based on the way that we typically do things. We got a little bit of a slow start. We're meeting only every couple weeks. Maybe, you know, I'm asking you to watch like 1 million hours of videos every week. So what I think we should do is we should move this back to, and if we move it back, it's got to go pretty far. But I'm totally fine saying, let's do this the last meeting in November. So November 24th would be when we'd get together and sort of share our ideas on, is that right after Thanksgiving?
Before.
Is that before or after?
No, I think that is the day after.
Yeah.
We were
I think so.
gonna change the.
Yeah, we did something different.
Yeah, we need to take a look at that.
Let me double check, because if so, then we should probably not meet that week and meet the week before.
23rd.
So yeah, Thanksgiving the 23rd, so we're meeting actually on, looks like.
Let's do the 17th.
The 9th, no, excuse me, the 10th and the 17th.
Yeah, so let's do 17th. How does that sound? Middle of November?
So what is it we could bring? What does that look like? Or in your mind, what are you imagining?
So what I'm seeing is that the next the next 2 times we get together, I would like us to sort of kind of blitz through the beginning Tlingit, probably chapters 1 and 2 and maybe 3, and practice those things together, talk about those concepts. But I'm hoping we can actually workshop some ideas in here. I want to learn how to say, I want to learn how to do this. And then when we get to this 17th, class on the 17th, my hope is that you can actually just present us your lesson idea. So you would maybe give us some handouts so that we can sort of see, or you could just show us on the board. And then you would talk through what it would do, and you would also talk about how it incorporates the Tlingit language and how you would hope to develop this idea as you go along. Because I'm not expecting fully developed sort of things, but I'm really just sort of, my hope is that these are things that you are going to use, because that's the whole goal of this class, is to say, hey, let's teach you some Tlingit, let's get that Tlingit out there. Because we want the language to not be this unusual thing, or this thing that only exists in these certain spaces. And I think this is going to go a long ways to some of the things we still encounter, or at least I do, these ideas that the language is like some kind of obsolete thing, or some kind of, you know, my students, they get this all the time. They say, hey, I'm learning Tlingit. And people say, well, what's the point of that? And we want to make that sound as ridiculous to most people as it does to us, right? And so, but the other thing is we want it to not be unusual. I think somebody is planning to introduce some kind of city ordinance that says a name of a street must be able to be pronounced by children and first responders. But what they're really doing is saying things cannot have complicated Tlingit names. And when we say complicated, we're talking about monolingual English speakers. I don't think they're targeting like a Tagalog street name or a Hawaiian street name. Right? This is a very subtle approach to anti-Tlingit language legislation. And I think it's a city ordinance. I don't know where it's at. I'm going to go try and find out some more information about it. But as we sort of hear these things, we want to just say, hey, the language is all over, and it's just totally fine to use it, right? You can have a street called Kanata'dei, and people can just learn how to say that. I mean, if you go to Hawaii, you don't get to just demand that everything be Jones Street and John whatever. They have Hawaiian names. And if you call and ask when the bus comes, they might get mad at you because you can't pronounce the name. And I like that. And I think that's a great thing. And so these are some things for us to think about as, you know, what are our goals as we gather here? The goals are to learn some Tlingit, and hopefully you can be able to do some of that stuff. And, you know, as we look at beginning Tlingit, we're kind of, you know, we've got these sound things. We haven't done a whole lot today, but the sound practice, really focusing on the consonants are a big thing, but the vowels are probably a bigger thing, because they you know, I continue to stress that I think there are 4 vowels in Tlingit, and each of those 4 has 4 forms. They have a short form, they have a short high, short low, long high, long low. You know, so but I think they are all the same because you'll see them kind of moving sometimes. It'll shift, right? So you can have a verb root that could be goot, which is to walk, and it could appear as goot, goot, gut. It's the same verb root. And so sometimes that verb root moves like that. And so we have to get comfortable with the idea that these are they're the same vowel. But then also making sure that if it's long, we're keeping it long. If it's short, we're keeping it short. If it's high or low, we're paying attention to that kind of stuff. Because some of the things that creep into our vocabulary and the ways that we talk, like, this is how you ask a question. But in Hawaiian, this is how you ask a question. But in Tlingit, this is how you ask a question, right? So it does not ask a question with tone because it's a tone language. I still catch myself, right? I'd say, Yate tuasaku? That is incorrect, right? So I could say, Yatage tuasaku? And so these are some things that we focus on. The fact how the sort of language is structured and how we sort of can identify when our sort of English habits are creeping in, which is totally fine, are creeping in. We try to just sort of push some things as much as we can and just try and be creative about ways we could bring Tlingit into a whole bunch of different classrooms, because I think it's really fun. And there's all kinds of different sort of things we get to. What these lessons do, they teach you sounds, you're learning the names of these different things, learn how to ask some basic questions. You start getting your first kind of verbs in some places. We've talked about some of these senses of space. And then we start getting into kind of identity questions. So the things, when we all come back, we should all have maybe a couple different options of things that we would like to be called when we're speaking Tlingit. And it's a nickname. Some of us might have one already, or if you have a different, if you want to just use your own name, that's fine. If you have a different indigenous name that you want to use, that's fine. If you want to construct a name, that's fine. I might exercise veto power. And so I had a student who wanted to be Big Fart or something like that, and I said no. I said, what if we bring elders in here? What are you going to do?
Maybe you can explain a little bit about how Tlingit names are formed or where they come from, because like thinking about trying to identify for myself something, is it appropriate to call myself the name of an animal, or is that not appropriate? Or, like I can't quite understand the appropriate way to formulate what I could name myself.
Yeah, and so this is where I sometimes maintain some veto, because you might just sort of, hey, these things would be put together would be really neat. I say, oh, that's a clan name. So we try to avoid things that might be clan names, and we might run into something where they are. And so there's certain, as far as and feel free to chime in if you've got ideas, Dr. Ginny, but I've had students who've chosen like Hoodzi is a comet. That's kind of cool. And it's also charred wood. Kasechcha, Kaklahin is like slushy rain. And things that you kind of like. And I have a student she chose Zisk, which is a moose, and that's totally fine, right? And so there's any number of things that we can sort of put together, and it's just something so we can have something to call you in Tlingit. And it's really fun because with the Tlingit students, a lot of times we start going so far with it that when I hear like their English name, I'm like, who? And so that's kind of fun too. But I like to keep it a real low pressure thing, so it's not like you're assuming any new identity. There's a little bit of that, just because you're entering into the language, and we'll start sort of talking about that. And also when we talk about this identity chapter, thinking about who your father's people are and who your grandparents are. And we start bringing some thoughts about our lineage, and these things are really important, and it doesn't, these things are things that we like to talk about in the language. So, Bumblebee is another one that I just.
What about like how Tlingit people's names are arrived at? Like those are names, or do they come through this kind of process of creating? Like you guys were talking about, what does Dapjini mean?
Yeah, some of these are really old names, and so some of them they're kind of obvious. Like I think there's some names of people that are. It's really obvious, like Donna Walk. It's like silver and I put together. There's stories behind that. Then there's other ones like Akeish, means like good father. That's another name. And so the ways those, who knows, a long time ago how they sort of came. But when new names are made too, sometimes it's based on some event. Sometimes it's related to a place name. Sometimes, like, there might be a Khone, or like let's say there was a Dashjini and she's Kagwantan. Whoever the oldest first Dashjini was, her father's people, there might be a name for Dashjini Ish. Like that name might exist. So that's pretty common where there's, Satan is another one of, I think, Nakatan's name, and there's a Satan Tla, right? And so sometimes you have those where it's just, literally just means the mother of Satan, right? But usually, a lot of them, I would say, have meaning. But then there's a lot of them where we're not sure what they mean anymore because they're so old or they're from specific things.
And would it be appropriate if we liked a name like someone's name that we liked? Like using someone else's name, that doesn't feel right.
Yeah, no, because those are clan, and so they're related to clans and stuff. So we try to steer
don't
clear.
belong to like that. Dashjini doesn't belong to me. It's a clan-owned name.
Okay.
Money was brought out, and money was killed, and there were witnesses.
But there's ways to go sort of, like let's say you read some story and you like the story, to find a sort of tangent that relates to that, but that doesn't get too close because the stories are owned by clans and songs and places and these names, and so we try to steer clear of those. But let's just get together, when we get back together in a couple weeks, let's have a couple ideas. And you can shoot me an email too, if you say, hey, what do you think of this? Or I'm trying to tie these things together. Because I don't want it to be an awkward process. And it's something where, like, as you learn more about Tlingit down the road, you might say, I don't want to be called that anymore. I'd rather be called something else. And then, and I'll tell you if it has the potential to be embarrassing. And if you don't mind, then that's fine. But other people, so.
Thank you.
Okay. Cheese. Kecha, Johan.
But I think this is the exact format that I think we're looking for, is what integrating, like, so, because it's really the application of what we can do in our workplace. We appreciate that. And in our community. Exactly.
So this here's the last thing of the evening. I will not quit. Right? Because I know, the days get longer as we go into our semesters. We all get behind on everything. So don't worry. We got each other.
Can you say it again?
Okay.
One trick I can throw in there is I sometimes if there's a vowel before that first K, I'll attach it. So that way you're not putting, because I'm hearing a little bit of an A after that first K.
Right. Yeah, so it's almost like there's a piece of cake right in the middle.
Yeah.
Right? Cake. And
most times with like future forms like that, you will have an opportunity for a vowel before like
Yeah.
yay or K will probably be before
In the
that.
future, you're going to get a bunch of repeating consonants. And it really, like, kwadashit means, like, I'm just going to slide away. Right? I'm slipping away. So I'm not going to slip away. Okay. Thanks, everybody. Cheesh, please.
Bye, Sarah. What's that?
So it sounds like you're really encouraging us to try to think of the